Hello, friends. Let's continue on in our Bible book. God wants us to follow Him. And we've been following our Bible character, Abram. We followed him when he was a boy, and God asked him to make a very confusing choice to leave his friends and some family at his home to travel to a new land where God would bless him. But he followed and he was happy. We also know that Abram worshiped God, even if he didn't have a church, and he was wandering around for many, many days trying to find his new home. He still made time to remember that God is in his life and worshiped him by building an altar. Now, we have our newest story here, A Promise in the Stars. God had blessed Abram, and he had become a very rich man. If some of you remember our chapel, back in Bible times, they knew that you were rich when you had lots of plants that had food and lots of animals. That's how you knew you were a very rich person. Very different from now, where we have money in the bank or we wear nice things. Those kinds of things didn't show you were a rich person. Food and animals made sure and told other people you were rich. So Abram was living in a new home in his new land. There were all kinds of trees and vines that provided delicious food for Abram, Sarai, and their servants. Abram also had many animals: donkeys, camels, cows, goats, and sheep. Those animals were having babies and making Abram even richer. But as Abram took a walk through his camp, he became very sad. As he looked at all his animals, he saw they were having babies. The mama goat had a little kid. The mama sheep had a little lamb. Mama cow had a calf. Even Abram's servants had children too. But Abram and Sarai did not have a child of their own, and that made him very, very sad. Abram remembered that God had promised to bless him, and God did bless Abram in many different ways. But God, Abram said one time when he was praying, Sarai and I still don't have any children. Abram told God one night. Oh, God knew how Abram and Sarai felt, so God spoke to Abram and to encourage him. Oh, don't be afraid, Abram. I haven't forgotten about you. Look up at the stars in the sky. Can you count them all? There were millions of stars in the night sky. Abram could never count that many stars. There are too many stars for you to count, huh, Abram? God explained. Just like those stars are too many to count. Someday you'll have children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren that you'll never be able to count how many people are in your big family. Oh, that seems impossible, God, Abram replied. But I do love you, and I will trust you. Abram and Sarai waited and waited to have a baby. Abram and Sarai got older and older, and they still waited for a baby. They believed that God would keep his promise, but still there was no baby for them to care for and love. One day, Abram sat outside his tent, thinking about God's special promise to have many children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. But he was now 99 years old. He thought it would be impossible to have a child now that he and Sarai were so old. But God spoke to Abram again. I haven't forgotten about my promise to you, God told Abram. "I promise you that next year, at this time, Sarai will have a baby boy. I want you to call him Isaac. And from now on, your name will change to Abraham, because you will be the father of many. And Sarai will now be known as Sarah, because some of her grandchildren will be kings someday." One day, Abraham, now that his name has changed, Abraham was sitting outside his tent. Maybe he was wondering how God would keep his promise for Sarah and him to have children and grandchildren. As Abram sat there, he suddenly realized, oh, there are 3 men standing near his tent. "I'm sorry, come and rest in the shade with me," Abraham offered. "I'll have my servants bring you some water to drink and fix you some food to eat also." Quickly, Sarah and the servants baked some bread. They filled pitchers with cool, fresh water. They even roasted some meat to serve their guests. While they were eating, one of the guests asked Abraham, "Where is Sarah, your wife?" "Oh, she is in the tent," Abraham answered. Then one of the guests said, "Ah, about this time next year, she is going to have a son." Inside the tent, Sarah was listening to what the guests were saying, and she let out a giggle. She laughed when she heard that. "Oh, Abraham, that is too funny. We are too old to have a baby now. I'm all wrinkled, and it's hard for me to walk. My body is tired." One of the guests heard Sarah and asked Abram, "Why did Sarah laugh? Does she think it's impossible for her to have a baby? Remember, nothing is impossible for God to do." Abraham and Sarah quickly stopped laughing, and they knew that these guests must be angels, or maybe even God himself disguised as guests. Sarah and Abraham knew that God really hadn't forgotten about them, and he would keep his promise. What do we have here? A birthday party scene. Sometimes it's hard to wait for good things because we want to have them right away. God said we're going to have a baby. We should have a baby right away. That's what Abraham and Sarah were thinking. But sometimes we have to wait, like waiting for a birthday. It's important to remember that God wants us to trust him, even when we're waiting for a promise to come true. Here is our Bible verse this week, my friends. The Lord will do what he says. Isaiah 38, verse 7. Thank you, friends, for listening to this Bible story. We will have fun with the stars and talking about trusting God's promises. It's amazing that he even told Abraham and Sarah when their little boy's birthday was going to be. So trust God, even if you must wait for a little while that seems so long. Thank you for enjoying the story, friends.